In this demonstration, I'm going to walk you through building a SaaS software company inside of Bubble. SaaS stands for Software as a Service, and it's a bit more complex than the traditional business model that Bubble really excels at. You may be thinking or have thought of Bubble primarily as a company that helps you build software such as Facebook, where users log in and out of Facebook. Of course, they feel a unique experience when they're in Facebook, that they only see the posts that are relevant to them. And they can, of course, upload photos and do everything else. And you could, of course, swap this out with any other application you'd like. But the user logs in and out, and this is a traditional design, what Bubble is very strong at. But a SaaS-based business has multiple companies who purchase your software. So in this particular case, we're going to build an application that a daycare could use, although you could swap the daycare out for any type of organization that checks people in and out of a particular space. So, of course, at a daycare, it's children being checked in and out, but in an incubator, it's people who are coming in and out to work on their business. So, here at FGCU, we have an incubator in the first floor of Lucas Hall, where students come to work on their business, and we may want to see them who's checked in and who's checked out of the space so that we can get information about how long they were here or maybe what they were doing when they were here. So just keep that in mind as we build this software, that this could be swapped out for any other type of organization. But even more general, this is a SaaS-based business. Oops, an error there. That's software as a service. Okay, so you can imagine selling the product we're going to build here to multiple daycares. And I just put 3 as an example, but it could be as many as you could possibly find, as many companies or customers as you could find that are daycares. For each one of those daycares, they have their own, they think of it as their own set of users logging in and out of their software. But of course, you're just one company who has separate customers, and you're just building one piece of software that when you update it, the updates affect all of the daycares. Okay. So the construction of the software, the build is a little bit more complex, and you can imagine what some people might do as an alternative to just building one Bubble application if they were building a SaaS product is build maybe 3 different versions in Bubble. So they have version A, B, and C, and they sell that to daycare 1, 2, and 3. Now, this would be fine. You could do this. You could go on Bubble and build the first version A and sell it to one daycare, and their users log in and out. But you then would have to copy that code and sell that next code, maybe rebranded to the second daycare. You could do this. Of course, it would help with maybe increased privacy and having separate databases for each one of these companies. However, this would present a version control nightmare. In other words, if you made a single update to A, it wouldn't automatically update B and C. So this is going to lead to a lot of duplicating work. And so this is not really a great way to think about building a SaaS-based business inside of Bubble. You really want a model that looks more like the one I previously showed, where you build one application in Bubble and you make an update to one application that all daycares would then see as you make updates to your app. So we don't really want this, right? We don't want to build 3 different versions. We want to build one, and in doing so, we're going to run into some issues related to privacy about different daycares being able to see other daycares' information. And so there's some solutions for that. I'm not going to dive into those into great detail, just a high level overview right now that you may need if you intended to use this particular software later on to create custom data types for each company. So you might make specific tables in your database just for daycare 1, just for daycare 2, and daycare 3. That might help with privacy in Bubble. Alternatively, you may use a third-party database. There's one example company I list here called Zano. You can do a Google search for them to see how they interact with a Bubble, but basically it's a database tool that connects to Bubble and helps you do finer grain controls on what people within your application can see. So again, the main problem is you wouldn't want a user in daycare 1 to be able to see the information in daycare 2, 3, and so on. So the other considerations would be in Bubble to create good privacy rules. We'll take a look at that. And then potentially workflows in Bubble that move users away from pages that they shouldn't be able to see. So maybe you just control it by having pages set up specifically for a single daycare or for a user, and a person from another daycare, maybe an admin, wouldn't be able to see the information because even if they somehow found the URL to their other company's page, they would automatically get redirected back to their own. So you can do special things like that with a workflow, and it just takes a little bit more time to set that up. So this is what we're going to build, is just one piece of software that could be updated once, and all daycares would get that update. But keep in mind, it's not perfect. We have a database structure that looks similar to this, what we're going to build. And just to kind of walk through it quickly before we get started, you're going to have a user who could be an admin, an owner of the daycare. It could be a teacher, or it could be a parent. So all of those 3 user types, if you will, are going to fall into the user table. So all of those people, most importantly, would have a email and password login. They don't necessarily need to use it every time. In fact, you're going to see that we're only going to really need that for the owner of the daycare, but that's how Bubble wants you to set up a application in their software. So that causes some limitations for us. So this is how we're going to set it up with I'll point out some limitations of the software once it's built. But think about this, that a parent is one user type who could have more than one child. Okay. And in the app, I'll call it a guardian, because of course you could have, not just a mom and dad or grandparent or uncle who's a guardian of the child. So we'll call them a guardian in the app, and the guardian could have more than one child. Now, a admin is also a type of user. This is an owner of a daycare, let's say, the administrator of the company, and they could have multiple daycares. They could own more than one daycare. So we need to allow multiple entries in Bubble for a user to have more than one daycare. And the whole heart of the app is for the daycare to have a timekeeping system. So we'll call that an entry table, where a person either checks in or checks out of the daycare. So of course there could be multiple entries. In fact, there's going to be thousands, maybe tens of thousands of entries over the course of a few months in that one particular daycare. Same, for any one daycare could have multiple entries. So again, these entries are just the act of a child being checked in or out. Now, the way this app is set up is users are the only ones who can check their child in and out. They're going to have a special PIN to do that. And of course, that makes sense. A parent drops off their child at the daycare, they check them in for the day. Maybe that same parent or a different parent or guardian comes in the afternoon and picks the child up, and they check them out from the daycare. So the whole point of the app is just to keep track of that information about the person being checked in and checked out of the daycare, and then the administrator of the daycare to be able to see that information. So of course, administrators want to know who has checked in and who hasn't for the day, so they could maybe send a note or call the guardian to let them know they were expecting them but haven't seen them, or they would just want to know who's over the last week or so been out for multiple days, or whatever information they would want to know about the activity within the daycare, about the child being checked in or checked out. So this is how we're going to build it. We're going to build a structure that looks like this. But I'm also going to point out that there are other ways to do it. One that probably makes a bit more sense, having just finished this and thought through it in more detail. I think it probably makes sense to really limit the user to only the daycare owner. So the only time a person sets up a email and password for this application would be if they own the daycare. And of course, they could own multiple daycares, and they could use the software. In fact, they might, if they love the software, that's what they would hopefully want to do, that they're using the software, it's working for their one daycare, and they have another one, they would want to use the same software for their second daycare as well. But I think a better database structure we're going to find after completing this would be to have the user be restricted only to the daycare owners. And then we set up separate tables inside Bubble for a person who could be a parent or teacher in the daycare. And then the children, of course, would be another table, and parents and even teachers could have children, right? Some teachers at a daycare, their own children actually go to the daycare as well. So we have to think about these considerations when we build a database. It doesn't have to be perfect when you start. Of course, you could make changes along the way, but this is a helpful, I think, diagram to show and to really build any kind of application in Bubble, that you think about how the database is structured even before you begin building the pages. So what we're going to do shortly is look at the overview of all of the pages in the table in a little bit different, the tables in a little bit different way, and then we'll jump into Bubble. Okay, so you probably saw the final project instructions already, but let me just scroll down and talk to you quickly about this particular file. So by the end of these videos, you'll be setting up these separate pages. Of course, the index page is created by default in Bubble, but we're going to build one called admin dashboard, create child record, user accounts. These right here are just the create child record and create user accounts are just what they describe. You're just using these pages only as the maker, the creator of this application, to add new people. So it just so happens that this particular app wouldn't often need the owner of the daycare to set up their own account. You would do that step for them. Now you couldn't do that later, but what we're going to assume for this app is that if you signed up a new daycare as a customer, you would just help them get their records set up. So we'll do that. We'll do that step. The very first one we'll do is to create the daycare account from which we can attach everything else. So people have different philosophies in building applications. Some people start with the pages and creating the pages first. Other people like to start with the database side first and build this out. My preference is to kind of do both, maybe start with the database structure, get a few things put in, and then what I normally do is go and build a few pages and then kind of work back and forth between these two to get the application built. So we'll kind of see how it goes here in real time. The last part of the final project is to take the base that you're going to copy in these videos and then insert your own unique twist to what's been created. So if you are making this application, following it, the next step is to follow these instructions to put in fake data. All right, I'll show you the finished application first, and then we'll start from scratch to build the same thing again. So let me just show you the different pages inside of the Bubble application, as you saw in the Word document. And what I'll do is go to the index page and click preview. And I'll show you what it's like to be the owner of a daycare, who I just named, John Doe at familyresourcecenter.com. And I set up with a fake account just to show you this demo, where John Doe or Jane, logs in to their own daycare, and they have very limited options here. They can see that today's activity, that they had people, they had children check in and out of the daycare. They can update their own account settings. They might change their name if they wanted to, very simple. They could log out, or they could go to the login page. So at the beginning of each day, what they would do is they would log into the app and look at the activity, and or just open up this page on an iPad at the daycare. And the whole idea is that a parent would come up to, or guardian would come up to the daycare and type in their unique PIN. So I set one up for myself as a guardian, and I'm at the daycare. I'm dropping my children off at the daycare, and I click get started. So as the parent, I see my name at the top. My unique PIN is listed up here, 123455 in the URL. And so my children show up because they're attached to me in the database, and I have the ability to check my children in for the day. Okay, so I just click those two buttons to check them in. An entry is made in the database that checks the child in at that exact time. The date's then shown here. And let's just pretend I'm finished, right? I leave the daycare. My kids are inside now. I click finish. This now set up for the next parent to come and put in their PIN. You can imagine, one guardian drops their child off and a different guardian picks the child up. So this, I made one for my wife just as an example. She gets to the daycare, and remember the status of the children is that they're checked in. And you can imagine, just for sake of example, it's later in the day and she's now there to check them out and take them home. So she clicks check out for the two children. And you can imagine, a parent that had 3 or 4 or just one, it would look, it would show appropriately all of their children here. And she clicks finish, and the next parent can come and put in their PIN number and either check in or check out their children. So very simple application, but it takes a lot of work just to do very simple software designs. First of all, we don't want the situation to happen where someone types in a PIN number that isn't associated with anyone and is allowed to then log in. So, and we actually have it set up so that there's an error message saying this is not a valid PIN, right? So these things wouldn't happen unless you actually build them into the software. So what about the case where the owner wants to log in? Sorry, they could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the owner's unique PIN. And they need to be taken to a different location. They need to be taken back to the dashboard where they can see the activity for the day. And that owner may have multiple daycares that they own, so they need to be able to select which one they're looking at. So in this case, I just set up a daycare called the Family Resource Center, and this is the activity for the day. So you can see that, Andrea was checked out at 12:35 p.m. on November 2nd. Okay, so this is pretty simple, right? They would probably want a lot more features, but you can imagine building those out with these page structures in place. So pretty simple app here. The last bit of functionality that the parents might want, may or may not want, is to be able to log in themselves. So a parent could maybe, let's say, log in from home. Now, they couldn't check their child in because that would be kind of a flaw, right? You want the software you want the parent to only be able to check their child in when they're physically there. So they would have the software running on a tablet or a computer at the daycare. But you can imagine that the parent just wants to tell the daycare that their child is not going to be there that particular day. So of course, if they log in, they would want to see their children listed, and they just want to notify the daycare that they're not going to be there. So, or they might also want to edit some information about their account. So just 2 options, pretty simple. If they click on this option, they should not be able to click it again that day, right? If they told the daycare that Brooke won't be there, then they shouldn't be able to click it again and just keep sending this message. So we want to gray that out. And of course, you could do the same thing for the other child. So this would make an alert, an entry into the database that said that the child is not checked in or checked out, but that they are just, saying they're going to be absent that day. Okay, and probably would make sense to have a log out button in this particular location as well. But we'll just imagine that's the basic feature of the application, that a parent would only log in just to do that piece. So pretty simple. The homepage, has a very limited options. You just want to log in as the owner and set up the application for the day. You may get some alerts, by the way, in Chrome as you're building to save passwords. Just cancel them and close them. You may get messages to say there's been security breach. That's just the bubble software causing that error. So it doesn't happen when you actually publish the software and you have the right privacy controls in place, but it does happen when you're in the testing debugging mode. It thinks that there's a password that's been exposed. So it's not a concern when you're actually in a testing mode, but would be if you were in the live deployed version of the app. So just a heads up on that. So again, just the main function of the app is the owner logs in, they go to the login page here, and they set this up each day on an iPad there at the facility or at a computer at the daycare, so that the guardian can type in their unique PIN and check their child in and out. So you can imagine the same sort of thing you would want at as I mentioned, at an incubator at a university where students work on their startup companies. You can imagine a student is logging in, has their own PIN number to log in to the software to check themselves in for the day, and then they just check themselves in or check themselves out when they're leaving. Another thing you don't want to have happen is that a person types in their PIN number and it's already taken. Okay, so that's all going to be done on our end by when we set up a user. But the first time a parent sets up an account with the owner of the daycare, they would need to show them the correct web page to go to. So it may make sense to have a first time user ? Text right here, and click on that, and then that's what would help the owner of the daycare get a person set up. But we're just going to make an assumption that the owner sets everyone up themselves, just to work our way through this example. Okay, so let's get started. I'll go into bubble.com. I'm just signed into my account. I'm going to click create an app. Just a quick error message here to get through. Just updated the page. So let me do that again. Create an app. And just as we've done in other assignments, you can just choose to name your app whatever you'd like. Maybe you call it daycare and then just put some numbers and digits after it so it's a unique name, and create that app. And I'm going to show you how to do this entire app build from scratch, making very few assumptions about where your current knowledge is with Bubble. So let's skip the application assistant and just see here our blank index page. All right, the next step is to go into the data option and build out the database structure for the app. So right now, every application in Bubble begins with a user data type by default. It's already here. So we could start with that one if you'd like, and take a look at the Word document and look at the fields that we need to create. So you see children, daycare, first name, last name, status, unique PIN. Excuse me, it probably does make sense to go ahead and start with this structure, because we can't reference a daycare until we have the daycare built in the database. So I did put these in order where it makes sense to begin with a new type called daycare. So we'll start with a daycare, and by default, we'll make it private. Okay, so there's a daycare table now that exists in our database. And within the daycare, we're going to have an address. So each daycare has an address, and that will have a geographic address as the option for field type. And an address, a daycare can only have one address, so we do not check that button, right? If a daycare could have multiple addresses, we would. But this is one of those where it would not be allowed, so we click create. Create a new field for admin, and we'll reference, in this case, a user. Okay. So we're doing this because in the user table, we will create new accounts, new people that can log into the application, and we want to reference their entire collection of information. Okay. And there could be multiple admin users for a daycare. So we want to check that to say, yes, allow multiple entries. Create. Keep going. I'm just working my way down the list here. The field name of guardian. And this references the user table as well, because there are multiple guardians for a daycare. These are basically all of the people that take care of the children that should be assigned to that daycare. Okay. Create. This is the name of the daycare, the next field. So we'll make this text. There's only one name for a daycare, so that's not checked. Simple one here, not absolutely needed, but one to think about. I often use fields like this. So one for you to think about that you would, when you create this daycare, you'd want to call it active, because as the database grows, you might have daycares that close. And so we'll call this text. And when a new one is created, the default text will be active. So you can't do that right now. That's up right now, but we can at least create a field called status and a field type called text and hit create. And then finally, the last one is that you could have teachers that work at a daycare. And again, those are users. And there could be multiple teachers that work at the daycare. So that's why that's checked. Okay, so we have the daycare table created. Let's go down now to a new type over here in child. And I'm just going to work my way through all of these settings again. Let's go by default to make it private. Okay. Create a new child with the field of checked in. This time we'll say either the child is checked in or they are not, yes or no. This is called a Boolean value or variable. And this is a really important field for our application because different things will happen based on this condition, that whether or not the child is checked in or not. Date of birth. This will be a date. The daycare that the child attends. This will reference the daycare. So again, that's why we made this database structure in this order, because we want the child to reference a daycare. That's why I said here the daycare references the daycare table. We're saying that a child belongs to a daycare and they can't belong to more than one. Now, this could be a matter of preference. Later on, you decide they could, but we'll just assume that they cannot, that a child can only be attending one daycare at a time in the software. We'll click create. Of course, children have first names and last names. So first name is a text field, and they only have one first name. If you wanted to have a nickname, you just put field name, nickname, and last name. Field type is text. Okay, and we need an entry data type, private. Field name is child. Okay, and this time we're going to reference the child. So we couldn't make a reference to the child table until we had that built. So that's why we built the child 1 second. And an entry, remember, is you need to have it in the database where the child is checked in or checked out. So this is that place where that will happen. This is where that will show up in the database. So an entry will happen and only reference one child. Okay. And we will also be referencing the daycare. We're going to scroll down and choose the option for daycare. Entry type. This is the check-in or check-out. And then a third option for entry type would be planned absence. Now, I know it may be tempting to think that this would be multiple entries, but remember, there's only one entry type for each entry. Either the person, either the child is checked in, they checked out, or they had a planned absence. We're not allowing there to be 2 check-ins, right? So if you were allowing that there to be a check-in and a check-in on the same row, then this is why you would select this, but we don't want that to happen. And you'll see that more clearly here in a few minutes. So entry type text, and then guardian. This is the person who checked the child in or out for the day. And for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to say that there can only be one person that does that. So there's only one person that actually touches the iPad when they're checking the child in and out, and this is a user. Okay, the guardian is a type of user, and we'll do, because only one person can check them in and out and not two, we'll click create. Okay, the last one is the user. And we're going to create a new field for, these are all of the children that belong to the user. So this will reference the child. And there could be multiple childs that belong to a user, that belong to a guardian. So that's why we need to allow multiple. And you'll see when you click on that multiple, it says list of childs. So like in my case, as a parent of two children, Brooke and Andy for me, belong to me, the user, the guardian. Okay, second is the daycare. We're going to reference the daycare. Okay. And this is the user needs to be able to have multiple entries here. And again, this may seem a little bit confusing, but it's because a type of user could be an admin. And I discussed that earlier, that you could have a user, an owner of a daycare here, but they also own a different daycare. Okay. So because they could own more than one daycare, that's why you'd want the user to be able to have more than one daycare. So if a person owns the Family Resource Center at FGCU, they also own another, Milestones is the name of another daycare here in the area. They could own both of those. So because they could own more than one user could have multiple daycares. Of course, the users have first names and last names. First name, text. Last name, text field. And this is where you would define with status what they are or who they are. So we'll make that text. But this is where the person will either be a guardian, a teacher, or an admin. Great. And then they have a unique PIN number. And we'll make this text. Again, maybe tempting to call this a number, but for the sake of Bubble and making this work right in Bubble, let's call it text. And they can only have one. Okay, now you have the database structure set up to be able to build out the application. Let's go do one step first. This is a really important step for you to be able to test your app. Let's click on data and then privacy. And you're going to see a screen that looks a little bit different than mine because I moved forward, but it's eventually going to look like this later on in the video. But before we get there, it might look a little bit different. You'll still see these 4 data types. And what I want you to do is click on each data type on the left and then click the delete button over here. And that will get rid of that rule for the child table, delete for daycare, and delete for entry and delete for user. So do that for each one of these, delete each one of the rules. And what's happening there is we are allowing the person who's previewing the app to see all data. Later, we don't want that to happen, right? We don't want a user to accidentally see the data of the application who isn't supposed to see it. So we'll set these rules back in. But for now, when we're in preview mode and we're building the application, let's set all of these to publicly visible. And we'll double click on this page just again to look at the settings. I want to point out the page title. You want to change that to whatever the application name is. And we want to change the container layout from fixed to column. We'll leave the width of the UI builder at 1080 and the height at 900. Of course, you could change the height if you need more space later on. Let's leave the width at 1080. This is probably the most important step, is to change the container layout to column. By default now, Bubble has upgraded its software to have the responsive engine so that you don't have to upgrade it. And it was somewhat recent that they upgraded their software to a new responsive engine. So You may see a little bit different logo here if you were on an older version, but now it's upgraded by default on a new app. So your screen should look like this. And we'll, of course, leave the index page as it is. And we're going to add in a text box on the index page, and we'll call it the daycare login. Let's do it like this. Okay. And we're going to set the style to H1. Virtually every time you enter text, you want to do these same exact steps by clicking Layout and then choosing the option to remove it from fixed width. Right now it's at 200 pixels, so you can see that the E gets cut off because it's only 200 pixels wide. We'll uncheck that and do the minimum width to 0, and we'll fit the width to content. So it's going to be just as wide as it needs to be, given however many characters are in the text box. And then we'll make sure that's unchecked for fixed height, and you can actually set the minimum height to 0 as well. Because there's text in there, it's just going to fit, again, just to how high it needs to be. So the last option is to fit height to content. So we have this daycare login text over on the top left corner. It's in that position, again, because if I click on the page behind it, the index page, just the white area behind, you'll see index in the top. Because the container layout is column, it's going to stack whatever we put inside this column top to bottom, and it's going to tag it move it up to the top left corner. So if I click back on this element, the text for daycare login, and I choose the horizontal alignment to center, it'll move it to the middle of the page, which we'll just do that now. And then let's put a top margin of 50 just to move it from the top. Later, we're going to put in a header onto every single page, but for right now, we'll just have this be daycare login text by itself. We're then going to choose the input option for input forms, and we need an email and password for the login screen. So we'll create the first inputs, and we'll call the placeholder email, and we'll set the content format to email, and we'll check the option for this input should not be empty. Okay. A couple of options here to make the password input field. You could copy and paste this email box, or you can come back down to input and just click in once input and then click one more time to put in that input field here for the password. So again, this is the daycare owner just logging in for the day, and they're going to be typing in their email and password. We need to change that content format to password, and then set the input should not be empty to a check mark. And then the last thing we need on this page is a button. We'll put just below the email and password. And we'll say something like get started, be fine. Okay, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on making the site look better, because again, that's the assignment instruction, final project instruction that will be on you to finish, where you can make this look prettier with different fonts, maybe change the background color, of course, put these things in groups like we've done in other videos. But I'm just going to do the quick version and do things a little bit out of order and have you kind of go in later and put your own touch on it. So I'll click on this element for the email input and then go to layout, and then I'll also center the email under horizontal alignment and the password and also the get started. So they're all three centered here. And maybe we'll click on the email one here and add in the top margin of 20 pixels, and then do the same for the top margin for the get started button for 20 pixels, just to give us some spacing here. So we've just built the login page, and we'll call that the home page or index page. And we need now to add the next page, which we're going to do is to create a daycare account. Okay, so let's add a new page and call it create-daycare dash account. You can use an underscore or dash. I think just to stay consistent, we'll put it the hyphen like this. And we won't clone from any pages yet, and we'll click create. Okay, we're gonna get in this rhythm of doing similar steps here, where we drop some text on the page to say what that page is. So we're gonna hit text and then create daycare account. And we'll do, appearance in the H1. Let me make sure that this is good here. And the layouts, oh, we forgot to do the step first of the layout of the page to column. Okay, I know it doesn't look pretty yet, but column, and I'll click back on the elements tree over here and click on text create. And same steps we did before, we're going to uncheck the fixed width. We're going to get rid of the minimum width and say fit width to content. Same thing we did again before, uncheck the fixed height and put the minimum height to 0. It's going to start to look nicer. Again, if you need more space for this page, you could click on the page itself and do minimum height 900, and you'll see the page get much longer at the bottom, but that's just a matter of preference on how much things are ultimately going to end up on this page. So we don't need a lot of space, but we'll have the same or similar format here where we need 2 inputs. And this time we're going to do the daycare name. And that'll be text. And it should not be empty. And then another input for the address of the daycare. Bubble has a unique content format for addresses. So there's actually an option for that here for content format address, and it also should not be empty. And we'll do a button to actually create the daycare. So again, all we're doing here with this particular page is we've just landed our first customer, and let's call it the Family Resource Center at FGCU. Well, we need to create a daycare that is the Family Resource Center and give it the address and create that Family Resource Center in our database. So that's what we would use this page for. Okay, so same thing here on this one. I'll take some time to go into the layout of the page and click on this element and center that element, center this one, and this one. And if you're wondering why don't you put them in a group, yes, you could put these all in a group together and then center that one group. That would be fine. But we've done that in other videos, and you can go back and do that later. So we'll put a top margin on the H1 of 50, and then we'll do the same thing here for a top margin 50, and then maybe just set the top margin for the button daycare for 20. So this will be the page for creating a daycare account. All right, let's keep moving and do the create a user account. This one's a little bit more complicated. So we'll do add a new page and create user account. And this time, let's go ahead and clone the create daycare account so we can speed up our build process a little bit. So we'll clone the create daycare account page. And instead of it saying daycare account, we need to click on this element here and click on appearance and change it from daycare to user. So again, this will be the page where we create new users in our application. And we don't need this information. We're going to swap that out. So let's go ahead and delete these inputs and just leave the button here. And we'll change this from daycare to create the user account. And let's put in some different inputs. So let's click input. And if you move your mouse, the button on the left shows where it's going to go. Let me go ahead and just make the mistake of putting it below the button. So I'll click that there. I just want to show you that if you click on layout and then choose the option for previous, it'll move that element up and down if you click previous and next. You can do the same thing over here in the elements tree if you find that input by moving it, by clicking and dragging it underneath that button. So it's doing the same thing if you were to click and drag this above the button, just moving the position on the page. And again, all of this happens because you have the layout of a column for the entire page. So if I click on the background, the white area in the back for the page, it'll say create user account. That's the name of the page. If it has a column format, it's just going to stack everything in a column. Okay, so that's why it has that behavior. So for the inputs this time, we're going to change the appearance to first input to first name. This will be a text field that should not be empty. And this time I'm going to click on the elements, the left click, and do Control-C for copy, and then Control-V for paste. And I'm going to change it from first name for that element to last name. Same settings, it should be text, that can't be empty. And I'm going to copy and paste the last name again and switch this to email. This time we're going to change the content format to email. And the reason why we switch it and do this is because Bubble has specific settings for the email content format. It's going to check that the user has put in an @ symbol for an email address and they have a .com or something similar to satisfy the conditions. It's called data validation for an email address. So they won't let the user type in something that's not actually an email. Now, if you know what you're doing, you can, of course, game the system and just put in some fake email. But let's leave that, or let's set that to email and say it should not be empty. And same goes for password. It has unique settings. So we're going to switch it from email to password. And we're going to change the content format to password. And the special settings here is it's going to not show the characters. Of course, you know, like when you type in your password on most applications, it doesn't show the password as you type it. That's just a security thing. So let's copy the, actually, let's not copy password. Let's do a drop-down input this time underneath password. And of course, I'm going to move my mouse until you see the blue just below that input field for password so that it puts the next drop-down beneath it. And this one's going to be special for something we'll call status. Okay, so status is going to be one of 3 different options that a person can choose from. And those options are guardian, I'll hit enter, make the next selection, admin, or teacher. So those are the 3 things, the 3 status options that a new user could have. And I talked about these issues earlier in the video about why this may or may not make sense to have all 3. If I was to build this app again, I'd probably only have it be one option that the admin is the only person able to create a new user account. If we were creating a guardian account, we would set that maybe on a different page, and then additionally create a teacher account as well, just on separate pages. So if I built the app a second time, that's probably how I'd set that up. But for now, we'll just leave that here for status. This input should not be empty. Okay. And then we'll do another drop down underneath it. So I'll do Control-C and Control-V on the status element. And we'll switch it from status to the daycare. Now this one's going to be special. This is going to be dynamic based on daycare entries that have been made. So we'll switch it to dynamic choices. And we don't yet have the daycare built, but we'll come back to this particular part here in a second to fill out the options for daycare. But the only reason we have an error message here, red lines, because we don't yet have a daycare table built in the database. So let's come back to this. The last 2 that we'll do is a unique PIN number. So we'll need an input field, just like we did before, input, and then one here. And we'll call it unique. Doesn't really matter what you want the user to use, but we'll just call it a 6-digit PIN. We'll limit the number of characters to 6. Okay, and I know this sounds a bit odd, but we'll set it to text. And that's just a unique kind of maybe flaw, could be seen as a feature of Bubble. The ability to use the number or integer option in this. In this particular scenario, we're going to stick with text because we're going to verify that the person what they entered, and it just works better with using text in the situation. So we don't want it to be empty. And we're going to do Control-C for copy and paste. And this would be, the second one would be confirm PIN number. And again, it would be text, and we're limiting to 6 characters, and it shouldn't be empty. Okay, and we would want to move all of these to the center of the page. So again, you can group them all, which I'll do this time by holding on the Shift key. So I'll click on the element and then hold down the Shift key and click, and then keep holding on the Shift key and click, 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 click. And then once I have them all highlighted, I'll right click inside and say group elements in a column container. And then I can click layout and then just one time switch the horizontal alignment to center, and that moves all of them over at once. A little bit faster way to do that. And I'll give it a top margin of 20 to scoot it away from the top up here. Okay. Let's keep building the pages, and then we'll come back to the data afterwards. So we have the daycare, we have the user, and we also want to create a child record or account. So we need to add a new page and call it create child. This time I'm going to use the term record, and we're going to copy the create user account option. Okay, this time we would be creating a child in the database. So not a user, but create a child. And I'll switch from account to record. And you'll see the small difference between account and record here shortly. And for this one, we have a bit, and this is the main reason why it's a record and not an account, is because there is no email and password. They're not setting up email and password. The child doesn't need that. So we would delete email and delete password. You can right click and delete if you want, or I'm just clicking the delete key on my keyboard, the backspace key. We don't need their status. We know that they're a child because that's the page that we're on. We do need the daycare. And of course, they wouldn't have a PIN, right? Because the child's not signing themselves in. They don't know what their PIN numbers are. It's not relevant. It's not needed. But they would have guardians, and so we need to set that up. So first name, last name. Oftentimes, too, the daycare wants to get the date of birth because they need to assign the child to a classroom. So the next one we'll do is an input for the date of birth. Okay, so we'll do input. I'll put that underneath last name, placeholder, date of birth, and we'll change the content format from text to date, and it should not be empty. Okay, all this means is that when a person actually creates that account or a record, it won't allow that to happen if this input is empty. So date of birth, daycare, and then we need drop downs for the guardians. So we'll do a drop down underneath daycare, or let's do guardian 1. And this is going to be dynamic. And this will be based on a user. And we're going to set it up so that we do a search for all users. Okay, we're just going to search the database for all of the users. And the option caption should just be the current options first and last name, but we haven't set that up quite yet. So we'll just leave that just the way that is right there. So we'll do guardian 1. Input should not be empty. And we'll fix this here shortly. So we'll do Control-C for copy on this element, and then Control-V and Control-V. So we want 3 guardians. So we'll switch that to guardian 2 is the name of that element, and could have just done that there in the placeholder, and that would have fixed it. But guardian 2, and then click on the third one here and switch that to guardian 3. So all we're allowing here is for when a child is created to assign that child to one or up to three guardians. Okay. And we will have the final button say not create the user account, but create the child record. Okay, so we'll come back to finishing up those inputs here shortly. Let's just get all the remaining pages built here. That we want a admin dashboard as well. So we'll add a new page called admin/dashboard. This is the page where the owner of the daycare would go. And we'll just go to create we'll just clone from scratch here, create. Same thing we've done before, we'll drop some text on the page. This time I didn't clone a page, so I do need to click on the background page and click layout and then change it to column. And I'll just add a little bit more space. Call it min height 900 and click back on this element here and type in admin dashboard to match the name of the page. And we'll switch the style of that text to heading 1. Same thing we've done before for the text. We'll uncheck the fixed width, get rid of the min width, set fit width to content, and get rid of the minimum height. And this is just going to make it nice and tight around the text, the box around the text. We'll center this by clicking the horizontal line in the center, and we'll give it a top margin of 50. So we've done that a few times now. And what we're going to do is add a few buttons, some steps the admin can take. We're going to add 3 buttons. So we need to go to visual elements and button. And the first one will be that they can navigate to the login page. The next button will be that they can navigate to my account settings. The next button will be to log out. And you could put these options anywhere on the page. Just for simplicity's sake, we're just going to stack them together here. Okay, and let's put underneath that some text for today's activity. And let's change that text to a style of H2. Same thing with the text. We'll go to layout. We'll uncheck the fixed width, take off the minimum, fit width to content. You're getting used to this pattern now. Kind of wish bubble would just do that automatically. But we'll have today's activity, and here we're going to put the activity for a specific daycare. So we're going to select the daycare from a drop down. The owner may have more than one daycare, so they need to specify which one they want to look at. So the placeholder text would be the daycare, and it's going to be dynamic choices based on how many daycares are in the software. So we don't have that table built yet, so again, we'll leave that as it is, but underneath it, we're going to be building a repeating group soon underneath this. So we'll wait for the repeating group until we have data. It doesn't really make sense to build that repeating group until there's some fake data in the application, but we could go ahead and center all of these by clicking layout like we've done for the others. So layout and center these options and put some spacing around them as well. So let's do that now. Let's add maybe 50 here to the top. Doesn't matter how much you do on yours. Maybe this is just 10, between and 10. Oops. And then maybe 50 for this to get some, maybe increase that to 75. And then 10 pixels here to get some spacing on the page. Okay, maybe you want these buttons to be, left to right. That would be fine. You just need to put them in a group and then choose the option for a row container. So if you want to put them left to right, that would be in a row. So you'd have to highlight them by holding the shift key and click them and then put them in a row container to make them left to right if you want them to look like that. I may also do for the logout button, click on that logout one and choose the appearance and switch that from a primary button style to maybe outline just so it looks a little different. Okay, So we have the admin dashboard page built, and we now need the check in and out page. Check in, out, and we'll create from scratch. So this is the main page in the entire app. This is where the interesting stuff happens. So I'll click on the page again, do layout, switch it to column. Probably getting used to these options now. I just change it to 900, give some more space. Same sort of steps. We're going to click text. And this is how I build applications. When I'm working with students or building my own, I just start by putting in what I need on the page. So how about check in or check out? Of course, we could always change that later if we wanted to. But same sort of steps. We're going to put the H1 to say what the page is all about. That's the big bold font. We'll do layout, unchecked fixed width, get rid of that, fit with the content, get rid of the height, and there we have it in the top left corner. Center it, give it the 50 margin, and now we can build underneath this. We're going to put some text that would just say the parent's name. Right now we're going to put parent, and then we'll wait to put in the actual name of the parent. Let's click on this element and at least change the style to about H2. Okay. And we will set the layouts. We can play with this later if we want, but to center it and 50 top margin. Okay. And let's wait to do the repeating group for the children, but at least add the button underneath that just says finished. So this is like what they would click on when they're done checking their child in. So this particular button we'd probably want to be pretty big and easy for the user to click on. So we could set the minimum width to maybe 300 and let it go as maybe the maximum width is maybe 900. So pretty good sized button. We'll center it, give it that top margin, and maybe a minimum height of about 60 pixels. So maybe do a little bit bigger. Let's do 80. Good size button. So the person was clicking on it, they just couldn't miss it, but they clicked finish. Okay, so in here in the middle, we're going to have the actual children and the ability to check them in and out. So we're going to wait to build that until we have some data in the application again, because we're using a repeating group. And the reason that we'd want a repeating group here is because you would want to show as many children on this screen as they are assigned to a parent. So if one parent or guardian, actually should switch this to guardian, sorry, has 5 children, then all 5 children would show. Okay. And we lastly need an account settings page. So we'll add a new page called account settings and create. Same steps again. Oops, before we do the text, well, that's okay. Put the text on the page, click layout, column, give ourselves some more room. We'll make this text in H1. Appearance, I click on the elements, appearance, H1, and I'll say alert the daycare. This would be for the parent to tell the daycare that their child is not going to be able to come into school today. And we'll do the same thing we've been doing. Uncheck that, get rid of that, fit with the content. Right. We'll center this and give it top margin, pixels. We would have a repeating group underneath here, so we'll wait to do that one again. I'm just going to copy and paste this element just by clicking on it. Control C for copy, Control V for paste. And here I'm going to put in edit my account. So we want to give the user the ability to edit some simple things about their account as well. We're not going to really build this out, but just to give you a sense of what it would look like, we would have inputs here underneath edit my account. That would be first name. Okay, and the layout settings here, maybe 250 pixels wide by about 48 pixels high. And we'll center this one and give it 50 pixels of margin. And this will be set to, this input should not be empty. It's text. Okay, and so I'll copy this first name and then do last name. I'll change the parents from first name to last name. So if for some reason the person misspelled their name when they set up their account, they could fix that. And I'll remove the top margin on this one to just do maybe 10 pixels. Okay. I'll put some more text in underneath here to update my unique pin. And I'll layout, I'll center that, although it doesn't look great. We could fix that later. Same sort of steps here, fixed width, undo, min, fit with the content, 0. And give it that a top margin of maybe 10 pixels. And then we need 2 more inputs to actually update the pin. So the placeholder would be unique 6-digit pin. And again, this is a text, which should be empty. And later, we're going to choose the option to auto bind this to the parent elements thing. So we'll do that shortly. But again, we want to see some data in before we do that. It doesn't make much sense in explaining that until I can show you what the data looks like there. So we'll just get the formatting right, that it's centered here, and then we'll do a control copy on this one and paste just to confirm 10. Okay. We don't really need the confirmation. You know, the person doesn't have to do that step if you don't want it to happen. Probably even simpler is just to go ahead and take off this confirm pin. We don't even need that. That the person would just update whatever it is. The 6-digit pin here. We're not going to spend much time on editing. It's more important to me that we just do the basic functionality of the app, which we're starting to get the nice structure set up to get all the pages, the index, the admin dashboard, child and user accounts, the daycare account, the check-in and outs, the main page, the account settings. And I think we're close here to having all of our pages. The last one we want to do is the login page. So we'll go to add new page and just call it login and create from scratch. We'll click on the backgrounds and do same steps again. Column. Give ourselves a bit more room. We'll add text. Call it login. We'll set that to H1. Same steps again. Layouts. Probably starting to get a bit boring, but that's okay. If you get in this habit of building pages like this and thinking about what structure you want before you begin building, this is how fast the process can go in getting your app built. So we'll click on this elements. We'll do a layout and center. Get a top margin of 50 again. And let's just, for fun, let's put in a picture, an image underneath login. And we'll set the max width to maybe 350. Make it a little bit bigger than what it was. And we'll make this element fixed height at 240. Okay. And then we'll just go looking for a picture from clicking on the appearance tab and do search for free images. And then you can put in whatever you'd like. This would represent the school. So maybe you type in the school and just find an image that you'd like to put in, one that's kind of fits that size. So you could do something like this one here, or maybe these books here. Okay, just to have some imagery on our page, and we'll center that under layout. Give it some top margin. Okay, so this is where the guardian is going to log into the app. So we need to give an input where they type in their PIN. So click input, and here we tell them, prompt them to type in their PIN number. Okay, and the input should not be empty. And we can center this. Give it 50 pixels of margin. And then we need a button underneath to say submit, or something like get started. Then we'll do layout and center with maybe a few less pixels of margin. We'll do about 10, just right underneath the PIN number. So real simple login screen. The only thing the person can do is type in their PIN number here. Okay, this would set up the structure for our pages. We have the same pages that we described in the Word document: an index, admin, create child record, user accounts, check in and out, daycare account, and a login page. So when you're building an application, you could build it like this, where you type in what you need for the pages first. This is obviously something you don't intuitively thinking about, like creating accounts. Sometimes people create accounts, like if you go to facebook.com, they do it on their own. Other situations where the company creates the account for someone else. So this is what you're probably pretty used to seeing, that the user does it themselves. They click on create new account, and they get taken to an account, this creations step. Interesting that this isn't even a new page. This is just a pop-up. And so if you were making this in Bubble, you would actually just make it pop up on the login page. So this is, Facebook's home or index page. Very simple, right? Just a gray background, the name of the company, a sentence about what they do, and then just the login information here. Okay, so very, very simple page, similar to what we just made. And of course, they have the option for forgot password as well, which we would build in later if we were finishing this up completely. Okay, keep in mind that the forgot password page is already built for you in Bubble. So this is what people would go to if you did set up that functionality for resetting their password. That link would bring them back to this page where they could create a new password if they'd forgotten their old one. So that is already built for you by default, but we'll just ignore that for now and stay here with these pages. Okay, let's go back to the pages now that need to be corrected. The create child record, the first one, where we will change the drop-down options. Anywhere we had a drop-down, now that we have the database structure built, we can actually go in and fix this to where the daycare option choices will only allow the ones that have been created. So they're going to be the daycare is what type of choice we're creating. We're doing a search for all of the daycares. Okay, we'll hit close. And we'll change the final option to the current options name. So all this means is that we're going to go look for the daycares in the databases. We're just going to show all the ones that exist to the user, so they can choose between all of them. And it's going to show the name of the daycare. So we could have, listed the address, but that wouldn't have been very helpful, right? We want to look at the name of the daycare to be able to select which one it was. We may not know, by its address which daycare it is. So that's why we need to tell what the caption should be. So this will make it so that when we create a child record, we can actually assign that child to a daycare, and it's going to search through our database of only the daycares that exist and show those options to choose from. Okay. Same goes for a guardian. We want to be able to search for all of the users as we had it before. But in this particular case, the option would be the current options first name. Okay. And then let's be very sensitive here and click to the right, okay, and hit the space bar, and then do current options last name. So this would show the first and last name of the guardian. You need to do that for all three. So I'll close this out. I'll click on it more and hit backspace. And we'll do insert dynamic data, current options, first name, click here, space, insert dynamic data, current option, last name. So first and last name. And again, one more time for the Guardian 3. First name, click here, space, insert dynamic data, option, and then last name. So this will make it so that we're doing a search for all the users and we can just select from the users who the guardian is for that child. Okay. We want to put one more specific criteria on these guardians. We don't want to show guardians. We don't want to show all of them if they aren't attached to a daycare. So there's no reason to show a user, the name of someone who's not in that particular daycare. So the way we do that is we click on the guardian and then click on the search for users, and we need to filter the user table for only those where the daycare contains the right value. And we know what the daycare value is by what they select up here. Okay, so we can click on search for users. It's going to bring up this filtering capability. We'll add a constraint where the daycare contains the drop-down value. So we'll sort of do a search for drop-down daycare's value. I know that seems like a lot here, but again, just remember what we're doing is we are only looking for the users that have a daycare that is the same as whatever the person selected. We need to do that for all three. So click Guardian 2, search for users, and then add a constraint. Daycare contains the drop-down daycare's value. And again for Guardian 3. And that just helps speed up the process a little bit for finding the right user to assign the child to. Okay. Now, it is possible that two guardians have the same name. So you'd have to be a little careful there to think through how you want to handle that situation where they're two, Michael Smiths, there are two different people. So you'd have to know a way to select the right one. Or you could go by some other unique identifier. But for now, let's just think of it like the way we have it set up here. Okay. So that's to create child record. And for the user account, to create user account, we also had a couple of drop downs. We had a status that was static. It was just choosing between three options. But the daycare, again, should be dynamic. So we'll double click on the daycare option. Okay. And we'll choose the type of choice as daycare again. And we'll do a search for all of the daycares. So we're just going, when we do this, when we're choosing our source, you can imagine you're actually going into the database here and going and looking through all of the daycares that have been entered. So if I clicked on app data right now, you'd see that there actually are no daycares entered yet, and that's what we will do. But you can imagine that that's what's happening when they're saying do this search. That when the person's clicking the drop down, what they're actually doing is kind of going into the data and looking at all of the daycares that are in this table. Right now we have none, but we're going to fix that here shortly. So we're going to search for daycares and we're going to do the current options name. So that's the name of the daycare so we know which one to pick. Okay. So we have that corrected now. Let's just make sure we had no other drop downs that we need to fix. Okay. I'm going to go here to start inserting some fake data. And then you can add more as you see fit. So there are some criteria here that you need to do at least one daycare, 2 users, and so on. I'm just going to do the minimum here in the video, and then you need to follow these steps to do enough data later. So we're going to go to the create daycare accounts and then do preview and actually create the very first daycare. So this would be like we just got a customer. We went to the Family Resource Center at FGCU and we sold them on some new software. So we're going to set their account up, Family Resource Center. And before we do this step, I just realized we didn't actually set up the functionality. So let's hold off on actually creating this button. You're going to notice, and this is what happens when you're building an app, that you go to click the button and nothing happens. Well, that's because we set up no functionality for the button yet. So let's do that step. Sorry, I forgot to do that first. So we'll click on the button. We'll double click on the button, and we need a workflow to actually create that daycare account. So what we need to do here is click here to add an action. And go through the process of creating a new thing, a new row. Recall that every time you're creating a thing, you're creating a row in a database. The row that we're creating is in the daycare database. So we'll go to data things. We're going to create a new thing or a new row of data. And it's going to be added to the daycare database. That's what this page is for, is to create a daycare account. And we're going to assign the name of the daycare. Okay. With whatever the person typed in, the input, the value. Okay, so whatever the person typed in, this is the input. And if you hover your mouse over it, it'll show you the visual of what it looks like on the screen. But the person's typing in the daycare's name. This workflow will actually assign that value that they write to the name in the database. So this is a step that we needed to do before we actually tried to do it. So the address, same steps here, will be the input, the daycare's address. It says there was an error converting the address. So it'll give us an error message here. Just one step that I forgot to do, if you click on address in the design and choose address, that should be fine. So why is that giving me an error message? Daycare, data types, address, geographic address. Let's see why we have it here. Should be fine. Trying to troubleshoot here. So why can we create the daycare? We are putting that in the address. The input addresses value. Okay. Don't think I did anything different there. I don't know if it was just a glitch, but the address should be whatever the address's value is. I was just making sure that when you the type of field here for address in the database was in fact under data types, daycare, the address was a geographic address. So they need to match. This type of data needs to match whatever the type of data the person's putting into the input here, which is the content format address. So because we have that, I'll go back to the workflow. I'm just going to click on the button and then choose Start Edit Workflow. We created a new thing where the person's typing in the name and the address of the daycare. Okay. So we're going to use this to set up now the first daycare. We can go to, you don't have to click design, but we'll click on design again just to show you the page and then click preview. Now we can actually create the Family Resource Center. You'll notice that when you do click the button, nothing actually happens. So there's one more step I would encourage you to do. Oh, we don't want to type address. We actually want to put in an actual address, which I can get. I just go to Google Maps and I do Family Resource Center. We can put in an actual address. Just copy the Resource Center's address here. And I'll paste it in here to the address and click to create the daycare. I see a little blue line go across the screen, but there's really no indication that we did it correctly. You could build something that says success here. We don't really need that. But at a minimum, what should happen is that these fields go away once we click create the daycare. So they're still here. So if we click this again, that would create another one. So we really don't want that to happen. So if we go back to this button and do start edit workflow, we really should add an action here for reset relevant inputs. And then we can just click the X. So all that's going to do is after you click create, it's going to clear out whatever you typed in before. All right, just before we go forward, I want to do one more thing where we go to the create user account page, click on the design tab. And I want to do a few things as we need to set up a situation to set up the constraint where a person does actually type in a unique PIN. And if they don't type in a unique PIN, that they're alerted with a text that says, hey, this PIN is already taken. So to set that up, we want to click on the text field on the left and move the cursor underneath or in between the unique and confirmed PIN. You'll see it's blue right there. And let's type in that alert for this PIN is already taken. We're going to click remove style here so that we can make the font, click on the color and make the font red so it stands out. And how about we make it bold? And let's go to layout and take off the fixed width. Set the min width to 0, fit width to content, and set the min height to 0. So we have this PIN is already taken. And we should say collapse when hidden. So when it goes away, that space is not there. And we also do not want this to be visible on page load. So in other words, this isn't going to show unless the person types in a PIN number that is not unique. Okay, we're going to set that condition here next, where we're going to go to conditional. And we're going to define a new condition. What we're going to do is do a search for users. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to comb through the database, the user table specifically, and we're going to go looking for people who have the PIN number that the person typed in. And if they type in the same number of someone that already exists, the number of rows that we match on will be not 0. It'll be 1. Okay, so we want to set this condition where the unique PIN is equal to whatever the person types in. So let's input the unique 6-digit PIN, that value. Okay, so what we're just doing is just comparing whatever's in the database, that's the left side, to whatever the person typed in, that's the input. And if it is equal, that will show one record. And so what we're saying is we want to make sure that the count is not 0 in order to show this message. So if the person types in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that already exists, then that will match against someone that's in the database with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then that will be one record that matches. And so that's not 0, that's 1. And because it's 1, it'll show, we need to set the element is visible action here to show this alert. Now I know that seems like a lot, so I'll go slow one more time. And again, all we're doing here is setting the condition for when this element should show. So by default, it does not show. It loads on the page, but the user just can't see it. So you'll see in the elements tree over here on the left, under the group that we have created, this little eye icon. If you click on that, it'll go away. This is what will happen when a person loads the page. It's invisible by default. And what we're saying to do is to make it so, right, to take this so that it's not visible, collapse the space when it's hidden. So in other words, take away the space that it would have occupied and only show it on some condition. And again, the condition is when we go look in the database for all of the users. We're going to go look in the database for all the users. So we're going to go, Bubble is going to do a scan of every single person in this table. It's going to start getting rid of rows where conditions aren't true. So it's going to start with the whole table, and then it's just going to only look for rows of users where the unique PIN, so this field of unique PIN, when this unique PIN matches what someone wrote, it's going to keep that record. So in other words, if there's somebody already in the database with that PIN, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it would keep whoever that was, it would keep their record handy and say it's ready. This is the person, this first row. And so all we're asking Bubble to do is just count how many are like that, where the unique PIN in the database matches whatever the person typed in. And if it's not 0, in other words, if it's 1 or more, it only needs to be 1, but if there's 1 or more, then we want to show an error message saying, hey, this pin's already taken. You can't use that. There's already somebody with that pin in the database. Okay, I know that's tricky, but I hope that makes sense. And what we'll do is we'll move on to one more error message here, but let's copy and paste. Let's take this element right here and Control C for copy and Control V for paste. And I'm going to click on this text here. Text, this pen is ready. So this is just, there is already taken. So I'm just going to click on this and go to appearance. I'm just making this other field here, so element here, so we can do one more error message. So I'm going to click on layout of this second element here, and I'll hit next under the layout option under horizontal alignment, and then next. I'm just moving it down underneath confirm pin. And this time the error message will be different. We need an error message that says this pin does not match. How about just this pin does not match? So in other words, if the person types in a 6-digit pin, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then in the confirm pin, they type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they'll get this error message and says, hey, these two pins, these passwords don't match. Okay. So we need a condition for that statement. It's going to look a little bit different. And what we're going to do is say a conditional here. We're going to remove this condition and create a new one. So just there's a remove up there in the top right. And we're going to say when the input for unique 6-digit PIN, which is this one right here, when that value is not the confirm, this one right here, PIN's value, right? So when this is not equal to this, we need to show this element, right? This pin and this pin does not match. We also want to be mindful of the fact that the person shouldn't receive the message until they've had a full chance to type it in. So we want to do one more thing here, and I know this will be a little bit confusing, but we don't want to show it unless they've actually moved on to the next, or they've selected off of the confirmed PIN input. So in other words, you don't want to see this message when you first start typing 1, right? You want a full chance as a user to type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You don't want this error message to come up right when someone starts to type 1, when they haven't had a whole chance to type in the whole number that was typed before. So what we'll do is we'll say and, okay? And we're going to look at the input unique 6 digits PIN. Then whenever this value is not empty, and the input confirms value is not empty, a lot of conditions here, and there's even one more, and the input confirms PIN isn't focused. And what focused means is the person has kind of like deselected this input field. So in other words, they've like moved on to the next thing. They've clicked off to the side, or they clicked on create user account. So you'll get a taste of what this means shortly. All right. Remember, if you didn't do copy and paste for this particular field, if you just went to the text and added a new text, don't forget to go to layout and check the option for make this not visible on page load and collapse when hidden. Otherwise, it will show up right when the page loads. Okay, last thing we want to do is to actually set the workflow to create the user's account. So let's do that by going to Appearance, clicking the button and say Start Edit Workflow. And we need to sign the user up. So what we're going to do is Account, sign the user up. And we're going to take whatever email address the person typed in. So input email's value for the email. And for the password, we're going to type whatever they put in for their password, input password's value. So we're not going to require an email confirmation, but this is the spot you would do it if you wanted to. So you're used to this whenever you set up, your account for any other software where you use your email address and then they won't let you into the application until you've gone to your email to confirm that that's all real. And what they're doing there is just making sure that you haven't given them a bogus email to their company. Okay. Now we have a lot more fields that we want to change whenever the person signs up their account. So let's do that now. So we're going to set their first name to input whatever their first name's value is. And I'm going to make the suggestion to click on the more and choose the option for trimmed. So that way, if the person put a space before or after their name, this would get rid of that space. And we'll choose the option for last name and input last name's value. And again, all we're doing here is we're hooking, you might hear that expression, we're hooking whatever they typed in to the spot in the database. Same up here. Whatever they typed in for email is getting hooked or put into the right place in the database. So I'll take a quick second just to show you. You can stay on that screen, but we have the user's data type, correct? Where we have the person type in their first name and last name. But we need to tell Bubble that when the person types in their first name, that it goes right here in this box. And this is what we're doing right now. We're making it so that when the user signs up, that happens. So first name, last name, their status will be whatever they selected from the drop down for status. And remember, we have those 3 options that it can only be. We typed in guardian, teacher, and admin, so we know it will always be one of those 3 things. And then the unique PIN. So this is whatever they typed in for the input unique PIN's value. Okay, we can make this even more complex, and I may do that step here shortly, but let's just see that we can get this to work right, where we now add one more action here to reset the relevant inputs. So after that we've created the account, we just want to clear out everything we typed in, and that would create the account. Now there's a few more steps we want to do, and I'll go ahead and add these in now, where we want to not only sign the user up, but we want to make changes to other tables at the same time. So this sort of thing, normally you would recognize after you kind of trial and error, but I'll just give you the kind of click through here ahead of time, showing you what we would want to do. So what we're going to do is data things. We're going to make changes to a thing. And we're going to make changes to a user's daycare. By selecting the current user, and we're going to say the daycare, and we're going to add the drop down daycare's value. Okay, next thing, we're going to make changes to the thing for the daycares, where we do a search for daycares. And we are going to have to search the daycare for the specific one that we have already created. So we're going to do the name is the drop down daycares value name. And when it's doing the search in the database, it's a hard concept to grasp, but it's searching for, you know, that single row. And then we say we want to use the one that it found, the first item. It's saying here that it's possible that it could find more than one, and it's asking you what to do if there is more than one that it finds. And what we're telling it is to just choose the first one that it finds, because we know that's going to be a good one. So we're going to do this now, where we do the admin add and the result of step 3, the previous step. Okay, we only want to run this one when the person is an admin. So what we're going to do is the drop down statuses value is, and we're going to choose this option for arbitrary text, where the text is admin. Okay, I know this is a bit confusing, but these steps will sink in once you've had a chance to actually click on them and get a feeling for you know, what they're doing and see the whole thing once it's finished. But let's just, for the sake of argument, keep moving forward here, and set the next step if the person is a guardian. Okay, so all we're doing here is setting it so that when the person is created, they're put into the correct box here. So this is the Family Resource Center. All we're doing in the most recent step that I just did is just putting the person in here in the admin box. So if you want to go through and check that and see it, this is all we're doing. We're adding the admin to the admin box if they are only an admin. And the next thing we're going to do is for guardian. We're going to add the user to the guardian table if they said that they were a guardian. Okay, we'll do the same thing for teacher as well. So we'll have 2 more workflows to do here. So we're making changes to a user for daycare, and the fastest way to do this is really to right click on this step 4 and do copy, and then right click in here and do paste. And we're just going to change a few things. So we're not going to do admin, we're going to do guardian, and it should be the result of step 3. That's fine. But we're going to do a search for daycares where, okay, the name, that's good. That's right still. And the only thing we need to check is the change is the arbitrary text from admin to guardian. Okay. And then finally, the same thing, we'll do one more, Control C or copy here and paste. And we want to change this to, oops, to teacher. Okay. When the text that they selected was teacher. Okay, so the very basic thing we could have done and just stopped right here was just assign the user up and place all the inputs. But the step that we wanted to really do with these one of these last 3 options, and you can't do one of these last 3 options until you've done this option. So that's why I built this in first, was just to add the daycare to the daycare's name. I'm sorry, the current user to the daycare. So all that's doing is putting in the you know, who the current user is for this daycare. And so the next step is to actually make changes to the daycare. So we can't access these particular fields until we've done this. So we're saying here that we want to add the person to the admin spot in the daycare table if they say they were an admin, if they're a guardian, and if they're a teacher. And we need 3 separate workflows to do that. So that's this one, and this one. Okay, I know it's a lot of steps, but hopefully you got a chance to, later then go through and see what's happening with all of these. But we're now set up to be able to do something pretty powerful, which is add anyone we want to the database, and we have the conditional logic for showing elements when we want to. So let's quick preview and see if we can finish that. Okay, so we want to set up Jane Doe as a user, the owner of the application. So let's do Jane Doe, and we'll set the email to jdoe@gmail.com. Set the password to password so that you can remember those, and the status to admin, and the daycare is the Family Resource Center. And we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as the person's unique PIN. And just for fun, let's see what happens when we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we try and move forward. Okay, we had should have seen a text message here, a text field pop up here that showed that these two don't match. So we'll have to figure out what's going on there. All right, let's create the account. All right, and it's not resetting that field either. So something odd going on there. Let's go see in the database under users if Jane Doe was created. Yes, there's the email, there's the daycare they're assigned to. Jane Doe, first and last name, the status is admin with the correct PIN. We haven't created any children for her, but let's go to daycares and see that Jane Doe was added as an admin of the daycare, the Family Resource Center. So all of that looks correct. We just had one issue left there to resolve with the confirmation of the PIN. We'll take a look at that here in a second. All right, a very simple fix here for this particular element. Just forgot to choose the option here under conditional, did all of this correct, which is the hard part, but to set the element as visible, we needed to select the option to say to show it. So the action says, when these conditions are true, then we needed to say what to do. So it needs to make the element visible. You can see the other options. You can do all kinds of things that are conditional, which is really fun to play with. But the main one we want to do is to show it. So by default, it's not going to show on page load. It's going to collapse when it's hidden. It's going to make the vertical space go away. But the most important thing is we just need to show it. So again, all of these steps are just showing that, hey, the person needs to put the same value into both. This needs to be not empty. This needs to be not empty. And the user also needs to be, off of typing in the confirm PIN field. So let's test that out now, where we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it just searched the database to see if anyone has that PIN number, which we just created someone who does. So it's correctly saying this PIN is already taken, and we wouldn't be able to move forward. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I hit the tab key just to move off of this input, and it's saying the PIN does not match. So that part's working correctly. The very last thing we really wanted to do is to really not let the user move forward with clicking this button if this is empty, or if the PIN's already taken. So we do want some sort of block in the way of that the PIN is not already taken. So we did under when you click on the button and do start edit workflow, we need to say that you should only allow that button to be clicked when the same situation here, where the person's PIN is actually unique. So the way we set that is some tricky logic here, where we say we want to do a search for, just as we did before with the PIN, is to do a search for users. We're going to search and look at their unique PIN, and we're going to see that if it's equal to whatever they typed in for the unique PIN number. Okay, I have this all set correctly. And we want to click on the option for more and do a count of those number of records. When that is 0, we're going to allow the button to be clicked. So it's the opposite logic here. In this particular case, we want them to be able to go ahead and add the user when the count is 0. So in other words, it went searching through the database to see if anyone has the same PIN number as the number that was just typed in. It couldn't find anyone. So it's going to allow the person to click that button to sign the user up. Okay, which I know is a little bit backwards from showing the alert, but we really have to do both. Because if the person was trying to click it and couldn't figure out why it's not going forward, well, they would need to know from a text alert of the reason why. Okay, so we want to set up both of those options. Okay, let's go and add a few more people to the app, and you'll see in the instructions all the different users you need to add. But let's go and add just a few more here. I'll add my own name, but I think you should do yours to make it simple. I'll just add myself as a guardian. So let's see, I'll just type in my email address here, doesn't matter what. And I'm just going to use yahoo.com, this fake email address, excuse me, and the password is password all lowercase. Now, if you went to sign in my Yahoo, that's not what that means. You can't get to my email address using password. This is just saying if I set up an account with this company, with this service, the username and password combination that it needs is this email and that password. So this wouldn't even work on your app because you don't have a user with that username and password. Of course, you could create it yourself if you wanted to, but I'm going to set Snow, this person, as a guardian. And to this particular daycare, and I'll give them a PIN of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. So I just want to show you that if you try and type in 6 and then move off this field, it says that's already taken. So that's a good thing. We don't want someone to be able to type in the same PIN number as somebody else. So create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, and I'll show you what it looks like if you try to do it where they don't match. It says they don't match. Okay. Just confirming that the two numbers are the same. And the reason we're doing that from a UX perspective is we just want them to be sure of what they typed in, right? So they typed in this number. We want them to have that feeling. Is that really what you wanted? So they had to type it in twice to confirm that. So that's more likely that they wouldn't forget it later. So this is just a UX decision to have them type the number in twice. Okay, we can create the user account. It'll reset all of the fields. I'm not sure why it doesn't want to reset that one, but let's do another person. Just going to put my wife's name in here. You can do whatever you like. And again, I'm just using an email that I can remember, easy to remember, password that's easy to remember because I'll need them later. And I'll choose guardian. She's also at that place. So I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. So you can do a similar format for the people you add if you'd like, or choose whatever you want to start adding people. And then let's see, we'll add a teacher. So how about we just create a teacher whose name is Kayla Jennings, kjennings@yahoo.com. Actually, this one would probably be familyresourcecenter.com. She's probably using the email for the company. And we'll set her password to password. And she is a teacher at the Family Resource Center. And hers will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3. And we'll create Kayla's account. Now we can go back into this tab and click on data and click on the app data option and just go make sure that the people we created actually exist and everything looks as it should. So there's first name, last name, and their correct status with their unique PIN. Jane Doe's the admin of the daycare. And this is the attached daycare. So this odd number refers to the unique record for the daycare for the Family Resource Center. So we could click on this little search icon here and switch the daycare from unique ID to name so it looks a little bit easier to read, and click save. And you would see, okay, this is the Family Resource Center. So that that crazy characters were just a unique identifier for this resource center, which exists in the daycare tab. So we could go check the daycare again, just to make sure the family resource center is there. And the other steps that we were doing when we added new users in the workflow was to take that user we created and go ahead and place them in the right bucket here. So either their admin, guardian, or teacher. Okay. We probably could have set the status to active. You can do that here by just clicking on the edit button and then say active. I think I wanted a default. What we wanted to happen by default for the daycare was to have it be active. Let's see, status. We can type that text in for active here. So when we create a new daycare, by default, it will be active. So like the daycare is open and active. Could be that, down the road the daycare is inactive, but we still want the data to be there. Just show it. Maybe switch the status to inactive. Okay, so we have users, we have daycare, and what we're going to add next are the children that are connected to the guardians. All right, let's go to the Create Child Record page and go to the Design tab and click on the button for Create the Child Record. So we need to set the workflow to actually create the child. So the way we do that is to click on the action here to create a new thing. And just to pause again for 1 second, the reason why we're using data and things and not an account here is because the child does not get set up in the application as a new user. We would use this option if the child was being set up here as a user. Remember, we kept this specific to guardians, teachers, and admin. And what we probably could or should have done is really even restricted it even more so to just the admin and had another table for guardians here. So that's why in this particular case, when we set up the workflow, we're going to choose the option for data. We're going to create a new thing. So we're making a new row in the database, a thing or a row in the database that is for child. And the fields that we're going to set are these here. The first name is whatever the person typed in for the inputs first name's value. And you've seen this kind of technique before. So we're just going to kind of speed through here and do the input last name's value. And let's remember to do on this, we're going to click the more option and do trimmed. So just in case the user typed in a space before or after the name, that would not be allowed into the database. That happens sometimes when you move from field to field on a phone and you click the next field, it adds a space at the end. So date of birth, and we're going to do the input date of birth value and the guardian. Okay, so the first spot here we're going to do is add the guardian to the guardian one's value. So what we need to do here is create a new field, okay, where we have, and I think I might have forgotten this one before, is to do guardian. And this references the user field because users can be a guardian. That's a bit confusing, and you can have more than one guardian user for each child. So we'll do this option here for guardian, user, type, and create. So we're going to add the guardian for whatever the person selected from the dropdown for guardian one. Okay. And we can add more than one guardian. So we're going to do that guardian add again, and whatever the person selected for dropdown 2. They don't have to do anything. The user doesn't have to select a second or third guardian, but if they did, this would be adding those selections to the guardians list. So I'll show you what that looks like in terms of the database. So we just added this field guardian. So if I went over to data and looked at the children table, you'd have one for guardian here. What we're saying is that in this particular box, we can have more than one user. So that's all we just did in that last few seconds there. So we, in the child table, we said guardian could be a list of users, and that's why here, when we add new users to daycare, there can be more than one. I can just go ahead and click on that search thing and say the child, we'll use their first name and name and then entry. That was fine like that. So, okay. So we can go back to the workflow and finish this off. The last thing we're going to add is the daycare and whatever the person dropped in or selected for the drop down daycare's value. Okay, just as we've done before, the next action will be to reset the inputs. Okay, then just like we did before with the user, we're going to make some changes to the other table, to the user table specifically, based on some conditions. Okay, so let's do it where we make changes to a user. And the way we do that is we're going to do data, make changes to a thing, and we're going to do a search for users, okay, where the unique ID, sorry, the unique ID here is the drop down Guardian 1's value. Okay, and we'll do the unique ID, values unique ID. Okay, and I'll explain this here shortly, but let's do where we select let's take that option where we select the first item. Okay, so all I did there was create a condition where we search for users. We're looking through all of the users where we're looking for the one where their unique ID is equal to whatever the person selected for the drop down for that guardian. When we do this, I just want to remind you, all we're doing is we're trying to make changes to a specific row in a database. And what we're really asking, or what we're wanting to do here, is go to the user's database and find a very specific person. So all I'm saying is when the person is selected, like when Eric is selected, we want to find this person and add the children, the children to their row, okay? And so that's what's happening when we do this, make changes to a user. Okay, we need to add the first, whoever selected in the first drop down. But we need to do the same thing for the second and third. So we'll hit copy and paste. And instead of it being drop down Guardians 1, we're going to switch it to drop down Guardian 2. And it probably makes sense to delete this and start over. So let's do unique ID equal to you drop down Guardian 2's values unique ID. Okay, that, and then I'll do copy again and paste, and we'll delete this and add the third one for unique ID and the drop down Guardian 3's values unique ID. Okay. So we have that set up now. So let's add a child. Let's click preview and add a child to a guardian. So I'm just gonna take my child's name, Brooke, and do Arsenault. And you can put in, whatever date of birth. Hers happens to be 12/1/2017. Trying to get my daughter's year right. Family Resource Center, Eric and Lisa. So we can say that we're going to assign Brooke to these two guardians for the birth date, their name, and click create child record. It wants us to select Guardian 3. So it wants us to put something in here. We need to allow both of these to be empty. So I made that mistake before. Guardian 2, I'll go back to the design here, click Guardian 2 and say, this could be empty, and so could Guardian 3. Okay, so you will need to go back to design and choose those two options, 2 and 3. So I apologize, it happens sometimes, or make the error, forget to do a step. So let's start from the beginning. 1, 15, the daycare and 2 people, and we'll click create the child record. Okay, so it looks like it was successful. It made the child, so we can go to the data tab, click children, and see Brooke, Arsenault, date of birth, the right daycare, and 2 guardians assigned to Brooke. Okay, and I'll do another child, another child. There's the child that was born in 2020, and add her to 2 of us and create child record. Okay, then you click on data, and you might need to refresh the data by just clicking any one of these rows and then clicking children again. You see the updated database with Andy Arsenault added with the 2 guardians. Okay, so this now completes the process of adding users. We've already added daycares, we've added users now, we've added children, and the last step will be to add the entry. So the entry will be the child being checked into the daycare. Okay, one step I did forget, I just noticed when I clicked on data, and this is a good thing to see a mistake be made for. When I clicked on users, I was expecting the children that we had added to be added to the children location here in the table, and they weren't. So we have these workflows to make that happen, but the step that I forgot to do was to actually change the field. So I did write the right condition in, but we should have added to change the the field to children and add the result of step 1. So in step 1, we created the child. We just didn't take that child that was created and add them to the user. So this was the most important part. Actually, I just forgot to do it, and I apologize for that. So what we'll do is we'll do change another field here and do children, add the result of step 1. Same thing here, children, and the result of step 1. Okay, so in this process, when we create the child on this particular page, we actually make the new record here in children. So we add Andy or Brooke, and then we take this record and then we assign it to this spot here under children. And the way we do that is by building a workflow like this. So we could, we have a couple of options here. We could go and just create them again by going to the preview page and then doing the same process again. Or you can just go into the data itself under users and do it manually and edit the field manually. So let me show you how to do that in case you ever run into that situation. So we do need to click on children first and go look for Andy and find the unique ID for Andy and copy it. We can click save here and go down to users, and we could edit Lisa's option here and go to the children. It does say last name, so we can't use the unique ID. We have to search for it. Let's see. First name. And so I thought it was going to say unique ID, so it doesn't here. So we don't need to do the first step I showed, but you can see the option. It wouldn't work very well if there were more than one Andy, so we have to switch that. But we happen to know who they are here, so we can just do Andy and Brooke and add, and then this would do that same thing we wanted earlier. So we did that for Lisa. We now do the same thing for me, and we do Brooke and Andy and save. So now the children have been assigned, but the next time a child is created, we could just go ahead and show that here. Child, we're creating child. The next time we went and added them to us, it would be done correctly. Okay, so I don't need to show that, but just make sure you complete that step as well. All right, we're at the stage where we're finally creating the most important part of the entire application. You call it the heart of the application, where the guardian is going to check in or check out their child. So this is the most useful part. Let's go first to the guardian group. We're going to click on the guardian text and the group that encloses it, and just make sure that the type of content is user. And we're going to select a data source for this group, where we do a search for users, where the unique PIN is equal to whatever is up in the URL for the person that's signed in. So remember, when a person gets to this page, they have already typed in their PIN number. And the way we get that information here is we say get data from the URL, because on the previous page, they'll type in their PIN, it'll go up to the URL. Now we're going to grab the URL from there, and we're going to ask for it here by doing this, by saying we want the parameter that's called PIN, and we want that number that goes with it, whatever it may be. We're going to hit close. And Bubble thinks that it's possible there could be lots of people that have this PIN, but in fact, we made it so that it's unique, that if a user tried to use the same PIN number as someone else, they would be denied. So we know that they're all unique, but Bubble doesn't know that. So what we have to tell Bubble is say, use the first item that shows up from this list, because it thinks it's grabbing a long list of, or potentially, 2 or more people. And we're saying grab the first one. So we know the first one's always going to be accurate because it matches exactly the PIN that was typed in previously. Remember, the page that the user actually types that PIN number in is the login page. They're going to type in, 1, 2, 3, whatever it may be. And then they're going to be taken to the check-in, check-out page, where that PIN number is going to be listed up here in the URL. We're going to use that information to then actually customize this page for each user. So the first way we do that was going to click on Guardian. And we don't actually need the word Guardian, but we're going to leave that here just for the sake here. We're going to choose this click option and then do the parent groups user. The reason we can select the parent group is because we just did a search for users here in this parent group. This is a little confusing, but parent doesn't mean parent of a child. It means that this group is inside of another group, and this group behind it has a user. So what we're doing here on this particular element is we're saying we want the parent groups. That's the person that it found that matches the PIN number. We want their first and last name. So we're going to do first name and then click underneath here and then hit space bar and then do insert dynamic data and then do parent groups user again, and then this time select their last name. It doesn't look great here, so what we need to do is go to layout and then say that we want to uncheck this fixed width and set the min width to 0, and say fit width to content and the min height to 0 as well. So now when the person types in their PIN number, they come to this page, it's going to say Guardian, colon, and then, whatever the user's name is. It looks really cumbersome here. It looks like a lot, but this text will be replaced by whatever their first and last name is. And this is the special kind of sauce of what makes Bubble so interesting, what makes it such a great application, that this can be customized to whoever's logged in. I'm sorry, in this case, whoever types in their PIN. Okay, below this, we're going to need a repeating group of all of the children assigned to that guardian. Okay, so we're going to go down to repeating group and then hover your mouse just so you can see the little blue line in between the text element and the button here and click. All right, and then we're going to do the step of right clicking inside the repeating group and then saying group elements in a column container. Maybe the best thing to do first is give yourself a top margin of 20 here and then a padding of 20. So that way you can actually see the group above it. If you click in this white space here, that's the group. And you can see it over here as group B. And then inside of group B is the repeating group A. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do on group B, if you want to select it over here or select it here, is to tell the repeating group where the data is coming from. So we need to go do a search for, in the appearance tab, tell it the type of content is user, and then do a search for the user that matches that PIN number again. So we're going to do a search for users, again, where the unique PIN is equal to, and then get data from the URL and pin. So same steps as before, close, and then we do want to say it's the first time on the list for the exact same reasons as before. Okay, so now it knows who the person is. And then inside the repeating group, what we want that is to be a list of children, but it should be only the children that are connected to that parent. So we're going to do data source, parent groups, users, children. Okay. And let's set the layout of the repeating group to column. For some reason, Bubble does not change. It still leaves the container layout as fixed. That's the old method. And the column is what you're used to in terms of formatting for the entire page. I'm not sure why they don't, by default, switch the repeating group to column. It's something that they'll probably change in the future if they haven't already. So this is set to column. So now whenever you drop in a text element here inside this, make sure you put the element inside this first box. You'll see the repeating function happen here. What we're going to do is make this dynamic. So we want the child's name to be dynamic. And we're going to do current cell's child's first name. And then click on the space below, space bar, current cell child's last name. Okay, so we'll have the first and last name of all of the children that go with that guardian. It will only show as many repeating groups as it needs to. So if there's one child, we'll say one thing will be here. If there's 4, then all 4 spots will be taken. So that's the power of a repeating group. It's what makes Bubble, again, very interesting. Let's add the check-in and check-out buttons underneath to check in. And before I make the checkout button, I'm just going to do a little bit of formatting here, do a top margin of 10. Oops. And we're going to make the, change the settings just a little bit here to be, I guess 150 is okay, 45, and then let's make it so that we Control C for copy, Control V for paste, and now we can change the appearance and do the check out button. Okay, so when the user clicks check in, we want an entry to be created. So what we want to happen is the user, the guardian comes in, says check in child. In the database, what we want to happen is this entry will then fill in. A new row will happen that says the child's name, what daycare they're at, whether it was a check-in or check-out action, and then the guardian's name tied in here, and then these will happen automatically, the create a date and the modified date. So we need to set that up now. And let's go to the check-in button to create that workflow. All right, so the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to make changes to a thing. Okay, and what we're making changes to is the current cell's child. Okay, we're going to set the checked in yes, because that's the button that the person has clicked here. Check in, we want to set the field from checked in null to yes. Okay. The next thing we want to happen is we want an alert to show up. We want the user to be able to see that that actually was successful. Right now, we don't really have an element for that. So let's go back to the design tab and let's click on the visual elements alert. And let's set that in here. I know it's kind of hard to see. It's going to work right underneath the checkout button, but let's put it underneath the check-in button and then go to layout and then say make last. And let's add a top margin of 20. And so all we want to happen is that when the user clicks check in, it says success, so the user can tell that they actually clicked the button. Okay, so we want the check-in button to say success. Okay. And because we chose an alert, it's a special type of element. It already has by default, it has the characteristic that it will show up, stay for a few seconds, or maybe however long you want it to, and then go away. And so the way we set that is to go back to the workflow and say, click here to add an action, and then choose the element actions, and then show message. This is the alert that we just created, okay? And it's going to fade in 500 milliseconds very quickly. And let's just change the hold to 500. So it stays there for 500 milliseconds and then it fades out. And this is kind of what I think is an appropriate time for the user to be able to see that, hey, you clicked it successfully. And the last thing we need to have happen is that this is again, the magic of the entire application is we make the entry. So we create a new thing and we're making an entry in the database. Okay. And we're going to set all the information we need for that entry. So the child is the current cell's child. And by current cell, that just means it's wherever the user clicked, whatever cell, like the box, the row, if you will, that's the cell. It's whoever this child is. And again, that's set by doing the data source. So this is the magic of Bubble right here, is that it knows the unique child in each one of these cells. So the check-in button here is different from the check-in button for the next person. And that kind of shows up right here where it enters a child from the current cell's child. And we're going to do entry type. And remember, this is a check-in. We're going to do the option for arbitrary text. We want to type in the text check-in. Okay. And then the guardian. This time we're going to do the search again. So we're going to do a search for user. Just as we did before, we're going to get the user based on their PIN. And that's just getting the data from the page URL, and we're getting their PIN number. So we know who the user is because it comes from the URL. And again, it's just going to ask us for the first item on the list. We know that the first item is the one that we want, and there are no other items. Okay, guardian, and the last one, daycare. We're going to set this to the current cell's child's daycare. So whatever the daycare is that's attached to that child, it's going to be put in the entry there. So what's going to happen when the user clicks check-in is the information is now going to be created in that row by what we just did right there. Okay, we also need a button. We need a workflow for the checkout operation. Now we could start from scratch, or the faster way to do it is go to workflow and do right click here and copy, and then right click and paste. And they're both exactly the same, so that right now, if the person clicked check in, both of these would happen, it would duplicate. But let's take one of these and change it to the button check out. And we just need to change a few things now that it's checked out. It shouldn't be checked in yes. When the person clicks check out, it should be set to no. We still want it to say success, right? That you're alerting the user that they successfully checked their child out. And in this case, we don't want the entry type to say checked in. We want it to be check out. Close, and everything else would be exactly the same. So a new row is created, a new thing or row is created, except this time, instead of saying entry type checked in, it'll say checked out because they clicked the checked out button. Okay. And that should do it for this particular part. Check in, check out, and parent's name. And before we move forward, let's just play with the settings of the repeating group just a little bit, just to make it look a little nicer. Let's go to the repeating group and change the layout settings here. We're going to set, take off the style and set it to none, and change the separator to none, and take off the border. So there's no border around the repeating group. And then let's go to, instead of it being a fixed number of rows, let's set the min height of the row to 200 and set columns to 2. Just so that I can show you a little bit different look of this. I know it looks real cramped here in a second. We need to give it some more width. We'll do that in the layout section. And let's change it so that it's centered. Oops. I'm going to go back here. Let's keep it left. The whole group needs to be centered. You can do that by clicking the group and then centered. And then click the repeating group again. And let's come back into these settings. And let's make this instead of fixed width, let's give this a minimum width of 500 pixels. You need to be careful on a mobile device on how this looks and play with the settings. But this will be kind of a good start just to show you a different way to organize the data. We can set the fit width to content. Let's see, let's leave that undone, and then let's uncheck this, set that to 0. Okay. And let's go to the success button and say, last thing here, for the appearance for the success button, let's say for layout, we want the collapse to be hidden checked. So in other words, when this goes away, we want the space to go away as well. So the space is going to show up when it needs to be to just show the success icon or element, sorry. And then when it goes away, the space will collapse again. Okay, so we have this set there, and we need to lastly just say fit height to content, min height 0. Okay. And we can set the group here to have, if you want to click the group above it, just say fit height to content, and then a minimum height here of 0 as well. That'll snap the bottom to right up to the top. There again. Okay, so I just cleaned that up a little bit just to make it look a little bit nicer. But this is going to say the child's name and then check in and out options for the child. It repeats itself every single time because this is a repeating group. Okay. Now there should be a workflow set for the finish button. I think we already finished that before. No, we did not. Okay, so there should also be a workflow for the finish button. So go to the design tab, click finished, and then do appearance and edit workflow on the finished button. And this will be to navigate the user back to the login page. So in other words, when a parent finishes checking in their children, they need to be taken back to the login page, and we'll send the current user's information. Current user here, and then we need to click this button to change the login's content type to type user. That's just Bubble giving us the heads up. Okay. So we have the check-in, check-out page now successfully built. Okay, we have the option now to kind of test this if we'd like, and I think that's a good idea. What we'll do is go to the login page. Okay. One thing we forgot, one more item. Before we do that, let's go back to the check-in, check-out page and set a conditional on these buttons. So if we had done nothing, the user could have clicked check in and then clicked it again. So they could have checked in a child twice, and we don't want that to happen. So the way we're going to control that is by setting a conditional on the button, actually on each button. So we're going to click the button here and then click conditional, and then define a condition. And what we're going to say is when the current child's checked in is yes. So when they are checked in, we want to do a couple of things. We want to make this element not clickable, right? Because they're already checked in, so they shouldn't be able to be checked in again. And as a visual cue to the user, let's set the background color to gray. So usually when a button is gray, that's a note to the user that they can't click on it. That's just a common thing between apps. So I'm just going to click on the colors here and just find something that's a little more gray. Okay, we're going to change the background color of the button from blue to gray. Okay, that's what this condition says. We need to do the same thing for the checkout button. And one trick in Bubble is to right click here and choose copy expression. Click the checkout button, click define another condition, and then right click and paste. All right, this time the checked in shouldn't be yes, it should be no. So in other words, we're saying the child is not checked in. In other words, they are checked out. They shouldn't be able to check out twice. So you shouldn't be able to click this button when they're already checked out. So we need to say this element isn't clickable. So when the child is checked out, they shouldn't be able to be checked out again. That makes sense. And the background color again should be gray. In order to get the background color to be the exact same as the other button, what we should do is click on the checked in button and copy and paste this background color. So you'll copy this background color, click on the checkout button, and then paste it here into background color. That way we get the exact same color. Okay, now we're at a place where we can test this and it should be functioning correctly. So let's go to the login. Well, if you don't remember the PIN number, the way to test this, the way to do it is to click on app data, go to your users, and find a user who's a parent and look for their PIN number. So this user right here is a guardian, and we want to get their PIN number, 123455. So we're going to go to the login page and type in that PIN number. Preview. 123455. It's going to take this PIN number and it's going to put it up in the URL. Now, we did this before already in the workflow that we created. This page is now able to grab who this is based on the URL, the PIN number up here. And that is a fantastic way to build applications. So these are multi-page applications where you're going from one page to another. And the only way to give a customized view on the next page is to grab information from the URL. Right? Just like Google grabs the information from the search to give you the right information on the next page, it needs to know what you searched for up here. So we're doing the same thing. This is correct. This is the guardian that matches this PIN number. And this is correct. These are the children that match the guardian. And this is a repeating group. It's showing 2 because there are 2 children assigned to that guardian. If there were 4, it would show 4 and so on. And we see the checked out button is grayed out. That's great. We check in the child. It says success. And that button, that element goes away. And we could check in the other child. All right, there should be 2 entries now created in the database. One is to check in, right? The other one's to check in, 2 different children. And by default, Bubble has these fields for created date and modified date. Now this just happens, these will never be the same, never be different, sorry, because the user can't do anything to modify this particular entry. That's fine. But later in the day, a parent or guardian comes to check out their child. I'm just going to go back to the preview page, click check out. Notice how that's grayed out now and that one's blue because of the conditional that we set. Okay. You may want to add a feature later on that shows the last time that the child was checked out. You would just need a text field and then dynamic data to go with this particular field. So you could say last checked in, and then type that, and then go get that dynamic data. So the parent or guardian has come to check out their children, and then click finish to go back to the login page. So that's it. That's the loop in the application that we just built that makes the app what it is. You know, the next day comes, the guardian shows up, they type in their PIN number, and they check in their children, and they click finish, and voila, you have the most important part of the application, the check-in, check-out system. We want to just go back and confirm in the database. You can click on app data and then entries, and you should see the entries starting to come in. This should be the most interesting part of this whole process for you, is seeing this is what makes an app interesting. This is a post on Facebook, a tweet on Twitter, whatever application you're using. Imagine all of the data that comes in when users perform the primary function of the app, like making a post. Okay, it's going to show up in a database just like this. Who was the person that made the post? What's the information that goes with that post? Maybe it would be like the text of the post and so on. Okay, so we just have a few things left to finish up here to complete this application. We're going to go to the admin dashboard and clean up this particular page. Now that we have finished each part, we can make sure that these are good. This would be that at the very beginning of the day, the owner of the daycare sits down to log into the application and says they want to navigate to the login page. So we're going to go start edit workflow and then do navigation, go to page, a login page. We're going to send the current user's information. Okay. They could, want to change their settings for some reason. So we do start edit workflow, and again, navigate, go to page, account settings, send over the current user. We're going to change the account settings page type to user. That's fine. And then this button right here would just be the log out at the end of the day if they want to. So we'll go start edit workflow. The log out option is under account, and that's the log user out option. And then we want to navigate them back to the index page to log in again the next day. Okay, so we set those three. We have now entries that we want to show for the day. It's a repeating group to show the check-in and check-out activity for the day for that daycare. And the way we're going to do that is to click repeating group and put that down here under the daycare. And we're going to put that repeating group inside of a group by right-clicking into group elements in a column container. And let's do a little bit of padding on this, just so that you can see the group on the outside here, the little gray area. And we're going to set the settings for the repeating group to be for entries. All right, what we want to show are, let's set the layout to column. Again, same step as before, we're going to set that to column, and we're going to set the type of content to entry. And the data source would be to do a search for entries. So again, what we're doing here is the admin or owner of the daycare wants to see the login or logout activity for the day. And this one's pretty straightforward as it relates to the daycare. Let's go to daycare here and do equals. One last step I missed here. If we click on the drop down for daycare, we need to change some of the settings. We haven't finished that yet. So let's click on the daycare and do the type of choices are the daycare, sorry. And the choices search are the current user's daycare, okay? And the current options name. So this would be, we want to look at the daycares that are assigned to the current user. Again, an admin could own or manage one or more daycare. And this is the name of each of those daycares. And we'll default to, let's just say the first one. So let's say the current user's daycare first item. Okay. And this is important because the filter would not show if there wasn't something put in there. So we're going to go back to the repeating group and click on search for entries. In the daycare, now we can choose the option for the drop down daycare's value. So it's whatever's in here is going to filter in here. So the daycare owner, manages the Family Resource Center, and this is going to show all of the activity for today in this repeating group. Okay, so we now need to put in the text in the first cell here. And what we're going to do is the current cell's entries, child's first name, and then click on the space in here, hit the space bar, and do the current cell's entries, child's last name. Okay. And then after that, let's add another text element underneath. So click the text, add underneath, and we want to put the time that they either checked in or checked out. So we're going to do that by doing current cells entries. Actually, let's do entry type first. We want to say what the entry type is. So was it check in or check out? And then let's do at. Then we're going to actually do the time now. Okay, this one's a little tricky, so I'll slow down just a little bit here. We'll do the current cells entries modified date. Could really do modified or creation date, wouldn't matter because they're the same. And we're going to format that as the date like this. So it's going to show the date first, 11/21 or whatever the day is. And then we also want it to show the time as well. So we're going to click here in the empty space, then do a space bar and do insert dynamic text current cells entries, modified date, same thing, but this time format as the time. So 12:50 p.m. So this will show it was check-in at this date and then 12:50 or whatever time p.m. There's a trick here in this search for entries that we're going to add one more constraint for the time of day. So the way you get today's activity, it's a little tricky. I found this by just doing some searching on the forums about how you comb through a database for things within a specific, date range. And so what we're going to do here is modify date greater than, and then do the current date and time. So it's whatever the user's current date is, plus days. And then we're going to do -1. And then we're going to do click off here and then click the more and then type in change hours to 23. Then click off here and then click more again and then change minutes to 59. Click out of the area and then click on the more again and then change seconds to 59. I know that seems like a lot, but what we're doing here is we're saying that we want the last date that it was changed to be greater than just 1 second past midnight the day that we are. So it's just going to take today's date and just go back to 1 second past midnight. That's a way to make that happen. And how did I know how to do that? Well, I just looked that up. I'm not that smart. So I'll let someone else who's smarter than me figure out how to play with the modified dates, but that's greater than that one. And then we need to say it's less than the end of the day today. So same sort of thing here, just a little bit easier to do, current date and time. And then we're going to do change to hours to 23. Click off here, do more, change minutes to 59. Click off here and then more, change seconds to 59. So this will go all the way up to the very last second of the day. So anybody that checked in their child right before midnight, the day that they're searching. Can't imagine they'd let a child stay all the way to midnight, but in case they did, that would allow that. Okay, last thing we want to do is just do sort by modify date and then say yes. So descending. So this is just going to show the last child that was checked in is going to show first. Okay, going to show at the top. And that's generally how people want to see that data. All right, let's go to layout on this repeating group and center it. Let's click on the group first. Sorry, this is group A in my case. So click on group A and then center that group. And let's play with the settings a little bit. We don't, you can play with this and say 280 with the content. I think it should be okay. That's good enough for this particular part. Of course, you could play with this and make this look better by just playing with the settings here. But we've updated now the admin dashboard. So what's going to happen is if we go back to the index page, we need to say what happens when the person clicks get started. And remember, this is the admin or the owner of the daycare. They're going to click get started. And then they're going to be taken to the navigation. Oh, sorry. First, we're going to log the user in by using their email address, email's value, and the password's value of whatever they typed in. Okay. And then they're going to be taken to the admin dashboard page. And we want to send over their information. When we get to that admin dashboard page, we want the content type to be user. So we're going to click that button as well. I almost always forget to do that step. Okay, it's good that Bubble helps us. So now we have it set so that when the person clicks the button here, the only people that would be doing this to log into the daycare are the admin. Now, you could have a situation where you want to set this up so only if the person is not an admin and they're a guardian, that they go to a different place. Like maybe they want to set up their account settings if the person's if the admin is letting the guardian change their PIN number, let's say. That'd be the number one use case. So what we could do here is say, this should only happen. They should only go to the admin dashboard page only when, and we type in current or click current user here and do their status is, and we'll do arbitrary text and do admin. Okay. So that just makes it so that the Get Started button is a little bit more complicated or complex, a little bit more functionality that otherwise, the next step here would be to take the person to the account settings page, and we'd send the current user's information. So again, the only time you'd really want to use what we just built is, or the functionality of it is, the admin is going to log in most often, but occasionally the admin might say to the guardian, oh, you need to change your PIN. So they would just type in their email and password, then they would be taken to their account settings page. We're not going to play with the account settings page. Recall, put some basic information here, the first and last name, but they could update their PIN on this page. And so they'd be taken here. Of course, they would need a button, to take them back to the index page when they're finished. So you could make that later if you need to. We're not going to play with that. That's kind of a nuanced thing there. So what we'll do is just go back to here and test this out. Let's go to data just to see a user that we have that is an admin, like jdoe@gmail.com was an admin for me. And I just set up their email as jdoe@gmail.com, and I use password for their password. So what we're going to do is click preview. Let's see what happens when we type in jdoe@gmail.com and password. Now, if you don't have this set up, just go back and set up a new user and just review the previous videos to see how that, or the previous spot to see how to set up a new user. So click Get Started. Okay. Chrome is trying to say there's some security issue. That's not a matter. That's not an issue here. Just testing the app. So here's the check-in and check-out activity from today, right? Filtered just for this daycare. Now, if the person managed or owned a different daycare, they would click here and choose the other one. And of course, they're just seeing today's activity because we created that filter. We see the student's name and a check-in at this particular time. And it's again sorted by the most recent. Okay, so that's fantastic. This is the most useful thing for the admin, is they can see the activity of their daycare. Now they might want something special where they click a button that shows just students who have not checked in but should have been checked in. So this would be a cool feature to add to the particular application. It's complicated, it takes a number of steps to do that, but it's certainly very possible to just only show the students who have not yet checked in for the day. Okay, that would just be showing a more filtered group, a repeating group, based on different criteria. Okay, the admin can log out, or the most important thing that they can do is go to the login page. And then if they had this on an iPad, they would just turn the iPad around, and now they're allowing their parents, the guardians, to be able to log in. So I'll do that now with a PIN number, hit enter. You see the PIN number goes up to the URL, fantastic, pulls the correct information, and we're back to the page that we had before to be able to check out the children that were checked in already, and then click finish. And now this just stays in a loop all day long. Okay. The admin could go and type in their PIN number, and we could set that up so that they go to their page. I think we had not done yet. Let me just make sure. Go into the check-in, check-out page. Oops, I meant to do the login page, and click on Get Started. So we just set up one workflow here. So we could set this up to be special, but I can clear this out. We could set this up to be special so that when the person's PIN number is linked to an admin account, then they go to the admin dashboard. But right now it's just set up just for the users to always go to the next screen, to the check-in and check-out page. But if you wanted to do that, you would just add a new action. And then I would actually move that action to the first step. So first it would check to see if it's admin, and if it's not, then it would go to the guardian page. Okay, so we have the basic core functionality built here. It's fantastic, moving right along. The last couple of things I want to show you before we finish is right now by default, there are no privacy rules set for this application. As you can see, the data for all of the data types is publicly visible. Anyone that knew their way around kind of the back-end systems that make up a website could go find all of the data for this app, and you definitely do not want that. Also, if someone knew the website URL, they could get to any one of these pages by just typing in the URL. So we don't really want a person to land on this particular page without having gone through the right steps to get there. So there's two things we need to do. First, we need to go to the data and set the privacy rules. And we're going to define a very simple rule for each one. We're just going to call it rule 1. And the rule that we're going to set up is that the current user must be logged in. Now, this isn't great. It's not perfect. This goes all the way back to the very beginning ideas I set up about how you want to design your application. But for the sake of argument, let's just go and set the privacy rule for each one, where the current user must be logged in order to edit any data within this data type. It wouldn't happen often, but let's just make sure we set these rules. Where it could happen more often is that a user wants to change something about their data, but let's do current users logged in for each one of these. And let's allow auto binding for all of these, for each one of these data types. So we're just doing the same step over and over again, setting the rule for each one where the current user must be logged in, and then allowing auto binding. And this is just allowing, what it's saying is that they could change the information in this field without having to click the save button. That's what auto binding means. So we'll just show the information, and then the user could just backspace and type and change it, and that would update kind of like a Google Doc where you don't have to click save. Okay, and last one is user. And they must be logged in. Okay, this one's probably the most interesting, where if the user's logged in, they could change their first name or last name if they needed to, and then their unique pins. The most often cases they're going to want to, a user, let's say a guardian wants to log in and change their PIN number. This would allow us to pull that information because they've logged in, and then they could actually go and just overwrite or change their PIN number because of this allow auto binding. Okay, so we set the privacy rules. The last thing we need to do is not allow someone to go to any of our pages. So we'll go one page at a time. Whoops. We'll go one page at a time and set a workflow where if the person's not logged into the page, then they would just automatically be taken to the index. Okay, so we're going to go to each page. We'll go to admin dashboard, click on the page. Just click on workflow. And then we're going to add an event where when the user is logged out, they get taken to the index page. Okay. So let's keep doing that. We can send the current user, set the content type user, and set that if we want to. It doesn't really matter. Okay. I think it might throw an error message. Okay. Now that's for this level. I'm going to leave that for right now. We'll leave that error message. We'll come back to that. Okay, so we need to go to the create child record page and click here to add event. Same thing. When the user is logged out, we want to navigate to the index page. I don't believe, let's try it without that. We don't send data. Okay, I think it is going to make us do that, but we'll come back to it. I'll show you the quick way to do that. So click here to add an event. When the user is logged out, take them to the next page. Okay, let's do current user. And account settings. When the user is logged out, take them to the index page, current user. Same step for every single page. I know it seems boring, but this is a very important step for the security of the application. When the user is logged out, take them to the index page, current user. And create daycare account. When the user is logged out, take them to the index page, current user. Okay, login. When user's logged out, application, take them to the index page, current user. Okay, again, just to recap, all we did here was say, if a person happened to know the URL of the app, like they went to, myapp.com, and they happened to know a page, that there was a page called index or check-in, they just happened to know that URL, or they came there accidentally from a link click on Google. If they went to the exact page, they would then automatically be redirected to the index page to be forced to log in. And that's a fantastic thing. We don't want people to just accidentally go to pages in our app if they shouldn't be there. Let's click on this option here for the 3 issues. You might see more. Just click on each one just to kind of see if there were errors that you might have missed. This is a really cool feature within Bubble. It takes you right to where there are issues. And so it's saying I need to fix this, where it says data to send. I'm just going to choose the option for current user. You can't send a page to a user, or you can't navigate to a page without sending some sort of data. So that's all it's saying here. And so we'll go to page, index, and send the current user. No problem. Okay, so we fix all the issues. It's going to persistently show this issue of having a Google API key because we use addresses, but you wouldn't need to solve that issue until the very end. So we will leave this app with 1 issue, but that's only because we use the address field within the daycare account. Because we use this address field, it's saying it needs you to use the Google API. And it'll give you the steps to fix that, but that's what that issue is created to. So you can't publish the app until you have no issues. And that's a good thing. It doesn't let bugs, some easy bugs be present in the app for when it's actually deployed. Okay. So we can now go to the index page and click preview. And just kind of make sure it's all working again. It's jdoe@gmail.com. Password. I'm logged in. I'm the owner of the app of the daycare. I see the activity for the day for this particular daycare. I want to navigate to the login page so that on the iPad or the device, the parent can come and type in their PIN number. The parent sees their children connected to them. They check them in for the day. They finish, the next parent comes, they check in their children, and it just keeps happening all day long. And at the end of the day, again, I haven't set this functionality yet, but I would want to set it so that if I was the owner of the daycare and my PIN number here was special, I need that special part to go somewhere. So again, just to finish this application to make it 1 step better, I'll let you do it if you'd like to. I'm not going to show you the steps here, but I would do under the check-in, check-out, under the login page, I would need a special condition for this get started button. So I need a special workflow where I'd say to navigate to a page, but only under a certain condition. So right now we have one set up here, but we need to then use this only when on the next one that we create. So it would take you to the admin dashboard page, but only under certain conditions. So I'll let you build that out if you want to do that. And of course, if you build that action, I would put it first, because the first thing that you want to check is to see if they're admin, then you send them somewhere. Otherwise, they go to the check-in, check-out page. All the users go into that page. So I think that completes the application. I know that seems like a lot for just a simple application. It's just really getting its start. You can see how complicated it is to build even more complex software. And again, you may have decided if you're rebuilding this from scratch to build it slightly differently, where the only user type is, again, the owner of a daycare. That would kind of change things around a little bit, where you would need to create a new data type for parent alongside child. So you could build it like that. I think that might be the better approach in hindsight, having done this build. But at least the application has all come together and you can see what it's like to kind of get it started. Now, the very last step after you fix the issue is to upgrade and actually pay to have a domain name connected to this application, at which point you would be ready to go. Give this particular link to the owner of the daycare, and they could start logging in. Now, if another daycare became a customer, then you would need to think about doing something different, which is building a specific page just for that daycare. And you could do that through subdomains. And that's what it would be. You just do a search for subdomains, and you could figure out how to build a separate page for each customer. And that's what happens with, just to give an example of that, a company like Canvas. So right here is a page where anyone from FGCU can log into Canvas. But remember, Canvas, the company, sells their software to FGCU. So when we log into Canvas, we log in through our FGCU credentials, and that's called a single sign-on system. But then it has FGCU as the subdomain. So if you're UF, University of Florida, selling if Instructor is the name of the Instructor is the company that sells Canvas software. So they make a subdomain for FGCU. So this would be like us making a subdomain for the daycare. So we would switch out FGCU for Family Resource Center. This is at FGCU and then this is the name of your app, daycareapp.com. And each one of these would change for each of the different daycares that buys the app. Now you can look up how to do those steps, but you have the foundation to make that possible. I hope you've enjoyed building this application, and I wish you the best in building one of your own.